Hello and welcome to part 2 of the Cobra Conversion Destro. In my last video I covered the Red Jackal's backstory and how he became a member of the terrorist organisation known as the Red Shadows. In this video I will cover the Red Jackal's final transformation into Action Forces version of Destro. If you can please remember to click that like button, and if you're feeling extra generous you could even subscribe to my channel. And by all means leave any comments below. Thank you. Now let's get on with the video. Palitoy's Action Force had proven to be a hit amongst the children in the UK and Europe during 1983 and 1985, becoming one of the most popular toys behind Star Wars. However, by 1985, Palitoy had fallen on hard times and was forced to end their production of their Action Force toy line. And with that, Z-Force, SAS Force, Q-Force, Space Force and the Red Shadows were no more. Hasbro, who had a distribution agreement with Palitoy from years back, now owned all the Action Force figures and wanted to replace them completely with their own G.I. Joe toy line while keeping the name Action Force. There would also be a new storyline to accompany the new Action Force, and the writers and the artists at Battle Action Force Comic were given the monumental task of trying to bring the two stories together. And I have to say that they pulled it off, and with, in my opinion, one of the best Action Force stories ever. And this is where we would see the Red Jackal take on a new identity, as well as joining a new terror organisation with a familiar leader. World Enemy Number 1. It's Friday the 13th, a day renowned for its bad luck. The evil Baron Ironblood, leader of the terrorist organisation known as the Red Shadows, had ordered his fanatical shadows to launch simultaneous attacks around the world. In Japan, a bullet train is hijacked. In the Java Sea, an oil rig is taken over. And finally, in the Middle East, one of Air France's Concords is also hijacked. The Baron now had hundreds of hostages under his control and holds them ransom to the UN, demanding £200 billion in sterling for their release. Later, at the UN building located in New York City, an emergency meeting is being held on how to respond to the Baron's demands. The UN committee have been deliberating what to do, and they unanimously agree that they must pay the Baron what he demands, as there are too many human lives at risk. In attendance at the conference is a high-ranking Action Force commander who urges caution. He warns them that they are paying that madman the largest ransom in history, and that he cannot be trusted and they should let Action Force deal with the situation. But the UN are having none of it, as they believe that violence is not required, as there could be casualties in the crossfire, and they think it far safer to give the Baron what he wants. Feeling happy with themselves that they avoided any bloodshed, they congratulate themselves on a job well done. Later on, while they are celebrating, an image of the Baron appears on the UN viewing screens throughout the building. The Baron tells the UN committee that he has received the payment that he demanded. The UN immediately demand that he release the hostages now, as he has had his payment. The Baron agrees, saying we'll release them, and utters the word blood. The Baron had no intention of releasing the hostages, and the word blood was a signal to the Shadows to commit mass suicide attacks. And with that, the bullet train, the oil rig, and the Concorde erupt in explosions, killing all the hostages. The UN look on horrified at the turn of events, unable to believe what has happened. The Action Force General grimly tells them that he did try to warn them, and that they were making a deal with the Mad Dog. The General also points out that during the Baron's message, the Baron had mentioned 4 groups, but there had only been 3 attacks. Was the Baron planning another attack, and where would it be? It turns out the 4th attack would be much closer to home than he could imagine. As unknown to the General in the UN, a Red Shadow unit has been deployed to a construction site opposite the UN building, and they were now preparing to launch a rocket attack against the UN building. Fortunately, unknown to the Red Shadows, 2 members of Action Force, Z-Force's leader Captain Skip Campbell, and SAS Forces leader, Commander Eagle Buckingham, were accompanying the general to the meeting. And they spot the Red Shadow activity from a room that they are staying in at the UN building. Acting quickly, they organise the local security forces to take out the Red Shadows, and they manage to stop the attack just in the nick of time, with any remaining shadows preferring to jump to their deaths rather than be captured. With the attack over, Campbell and Buckingham meet up and both agree that hopefully after this attack that the UN will take a tougher stance on the Baron. Sure enough, later that day in the UN Council chamber, the members of the UN unanimously vote that it is time to end the threat of the Baron and his Red Shadow menace once and for all. The UN immediately pass Resolution 909, the destruction of the Red Shadows and the death or capture of the Baron Ironblood, and full operational control was to be given over to Action Force. After the meeting, the General meets up with Campbell and Buckingham, congratulating them on a job well done in stopping the attack. He proceeds to tell them that Action Force has full authorization now to mount raids on all the suspected Red Shadow bases, and that the Baron has overstepped the mark this time, and as of now he is world enemy number 1. Campbell and Buckingham set off to the nearest military base to begin preparations for the upcoming operations, but they are both perplexed as to why the Baron has done this. They think surely he must have known what would happen, and perhaps that the Baron had gone totally insane. Meanwhile, in a hidden location thousands of miles away, the Baron smiles to himself, as he knows after his actions, Action Force will be at boiling point, while he remains ice cool. The Baron had been secretly monitoring the satellites, watching and listening as Action Force and the combined forces of the UN move into position around the Red Shadow bases, ready to strike. Knowing all too well that he won't be captured, as he has covered his tracks far too well, the Baron calmly sits down, waiting for the epic fight to the finish to begin. Meanwhile, at the Jackal's lair, which was once an Ottoman fortress, he notices vultures gathering in the sky despite the darkness. It's as if they can scent bloodshed and death. Knowing something is not right, he decides to contact his master, the Baron Ironblood, whilst ordering his sentries to keep watch. Upon entering the fortress command room, the Jackal orders his men to locate the Baron immediately. The Shadows reply that they keep telling him that their master is missing. He is not present at any of the bases and no one knows of his whereabouts. The Jackal barks back, "Then put another alert out. I want him found. Do it now before I break your neck." Suddenly, the Baron's image appears on the unused channel on one of the monitors. The Baron spots the Jackal and tells him that his friend the Jackal is constantly trying to warn him. The Jackal agrees, telling the Baron that he fears they are about to come under attack and that they must take precautions. The Baron agrees and tells the Jackal he has already taken precautions, and that he is hidden away in a secret location unknown to any of them, and that he also has no longer need of the Jackal in the Red Shadows, and soon he will be rid of them once and for all. Suddenly, alarms start ringing as the reports start coming in of Red Shadow bases under attack. The Baron scoffs at the Jackal, telling him that this will be the beginning of the Action Force raids, and the beginning of the end of you all, but not for me. And with that, the Baron bids farewell to the Jackal. It is at that moment that Action Force strike, as the doors are blown off the command centre, and SAS Force burst in, opening fire. The Shadows are taken completely by surprise, and they are quickly mown down. Thinking quickly, in all the confusion, the Jackal cuts the power to the fortress, sending it into complete darkness. And due to the Jackal's bionic enhancement, he could see perfectly well in the dark, and he quickly makes his escape through the fortress's dark corridors. Meanwhile, in his secret hideout thousands of miles away, the Baron is in deep thought. By now, the Red Shadow bases should all be destroyed, leaving him the sole survivor. And now he was ready to begin his new movement. One that will be even more deadly than the Red Shadows, and one that will make the world writhe in fear. But, unknown to the Baron, one of his followers had survived the attacks, the bionic known as the Red Jackal. He had managed to avoid the main attack and was now making his way to a secret hide in the fortress which he had just for this occasion. Hidden beneath an old well, long since abandoned, was where the Jackal kept his personal hyena tank. He waits till nightfall and then he makes his escape using his bionic vision to help him see in the dark. He vows to himself that he will hunt down the traitor Baron Ironblood and make him pay, even if it's the last thing he does. So later that night, the Jackal enters the Gulf Strait. He had remembered the names of businessmen who had dealings with the Baron, and one of those was a sheik who had a private airstrip nearby and was due to land sometime soon. So lying in wait, the Jackal uses his bionic vision to scan the sky, looking for the sheik's jet. Eventually, he spots it in on approach and gets ready to strike. Waiting till the jet is about to land, he opens up with a hyena's twin 50mm cannons, taking out the sheik's security forces first before concentrating on the jet. Seeing this, the pilot of the jet tries to do an emergency takeoff, but it is too late as the Jackal opens fire and brings the jet down, crashing onto the runway. The Jackal walks over to the wreck and starts looking for survivors, and he soon finds the sheik trapped in the wreckage. The sheik recognises the Jackal but can't believe his eyes, as he had heard that the Jackal had died in Turkey. The Jackal tells the sheik that he knows he had business dealings with the Baron, and he demands that he tell him where the Baron has gone. The sheik pleads with the Jackal as the Jackal slowly places his hands around the sheik's neck. Screaming, the sheik tells the Jackal that he is somewhere in the Far East and that a banker in Thailand knows something. The Jackal demands, "What location? Now!" Moments later, the sheik lies dead. A nearby passenger, who had also survived the crash, witnessed the whole thing. He pleads with the Jackal to save him. The Jackal turns and asks the man, "Why? Who are you?" The man sobs back, telling him that he is a Swiss banker and that he himself has recently been involved with transactions with the Baron, and that he carries a briefcase that's contents inside will prove it, and that the Jackal can have it if he promises not to kill him. The Jackal takes a moment, listening to distant howls. He then agrees that he will not kill him. Taking the briefcase, he continues on telling the banker, "I have promised not to kill you, but his friends of the night will, as they will soon be here, drawn by the smell of blood and death." Looking on in horror, the Swiss banker can make out shapes in the night, and as they get closer, he can make out what the shapes are: real jackals. Leaving the man's screams behind him, the Jackal now has a real clue as to the Baron's location, and ahead of him a journey of thousands of miles to find this man in Thailand. Weeks later, the Jackal is slowly making his way through the dense Indonesian jungle, hot on the trail of the Baron. The Jackal, you see, had managed to track down the man in Bangkok. The man telling the Jackal everything he knew before the Jackal ended his life. The days continue to pass by as the Jackal keeps pushing through the dense undergrowth. Scavenging food where he can, he is starting to weaken under the extreme jungle conditions. Until one day he stumbles across a huge overgrown clearing where stands what looks like a massive ancient temple. Was this the place that fat banker had told him about? As he gets closer to the temple, he notices that it's an ancient temple dedicated to snakes. This was it, the Baron's hideout. Exhausted, the Jackal uses his last strength and heads towards the entrance of the temple, intent on exacting his revenge on the Baron. As he gets closer, a voice comes from the entrance. The Jackal recognises the voice, but somehow it sounds different. The voice welcomes the Jackal, saying only the Jackal could have survived, and sought him out. It is then that the Jackal notices dozens of snakes oozing out of the walls and the entrance towards him. The voice tells the Jackal to take a close look at the snakes. He tells the Jackal that they are cobras and that he is their master and that he is also immune to their venom. It is then that the figure appears out of the shadows. He is dressed in a light blue uniform, wearing a faceless mask. He proceeds to tell the Jackal that he will be the first to know his new identity and the first to die, and that he has started a new movement of men just as deadly as those hooded snakes, and that the world will still cower in terror at the mention of Cobra Commander. Mocking the Jackal, he continues on, telling him that he's spent weeks searching for him only to walk into a trap, and that he is no longer recognisable as the Baron, as he has undergone hours of extensive reconstructive surgery, changing his appearance like a snake shedding its skin, and soon the Jackal will be a dead man. "No!" yells the Jackal defiantly back at the Commander. He explains to the Commander that should he die now, the Commander will never know what happened to the billions in ransom he thinks he has safely hidden away. The Commander scoffs at the Jackal. "What are you talking about? What dead man? What do you know of my fortune?" The Jackal proceeds to tell the Commander about the Sheik and the Swiss banker, and the briefcase that contained the computer codes to the bank vaults, and that he had managed to break the codes and change them. Cobra Commander screams back at him. "You lie!" "No," replies the Jackal, "it's all true," and he tells him that a gentleman in Bangkok was very helpful in helping the Jackal change the codes before his demise. "What? You killed my contact?" the Commander screams back. "Yes," replies the Jackal calmly, "and that he's the only one who knows how to gain access to the man's fortune. And should he die now, this new cause of his will be doomed before it even gets off the ground." Cobra Commander cannot believe what he is hearing, and knows he has no choice but to save the Jackal. The Commander quickly throws down a vine from a balcony above the entrance, urging the Jackal to climb up quickly as the snakes are nearly upon him. Grabbing the vine, the Jackal manages to avoid the cobras as they spit their venom at him harmlessly. Once safely at the top, Cobra Commander tells the Jackal that it looks like they need each other to survive. The Jackal agrees for now, but wants to know why Cobra Commander decided to raise his new movement in these ancient ruins. "Ruins?" the Commander retorts. The Commander then leads the Jackal into the temple. Once inside, the Jackal is amazed by the size of the temple's interior, with its large open rooms with huge support pillars. The Commander continues on, telling him that inside the temple is like a fortress, and snakes outside act as a deterrent to anyone who gets too close. What better place to raise an army? Hearing this, the Jackal thinks to himself, "New army? What about the Red Shadows, who he sacrificed without a second thought, including himself? If he had not been a born survivor, he would be just as dead as the Red Shadow movement." This is too much for the Jackal to accept, and seeing a chance to have his revenge, he lunges at the Commander screaming, "I will destroy! I will destroy!" Falling back against a stone statue of a cobra, the Commander activates a button, and a jet of corrosive acid spews from its mouth into the Jackal's face. Screaming, the Jackal falls to the ground, writhing in agony, as the Commander watches on. The Commander gloats over the Jackal, telling him that he will not let him suffer for long, as he needs him alive, and that a Jackal is perhaps not a creature of the jungle, and maybe he should have a new name and a new identity. The days pass by till one day the Jackal awakens to strange surroundings. He's on an operating table surrounded by strange medical equipment and men in white coats. Groggy, the Jackal asks where he is. Cobra Commander enters the room and tells him that he is still in the Snake Temple, and that he has had his top surgeons operate on him using advanced microsurgery. The Jackal demands to know what they have done to him. Cobra Commander beckons him over to a large pool in the room and tells him to take a look. The Jackal walks over to the pool and is shocked to see the face looking back at him, as it is unrecognisable. The commander explains that he is no longer the Red Jackal, and that he now has a new name, one that will constantly remind the commander never to turn his back on him for too long. Destro! The commander had used the last word the Jackal had said, which was cut off when the acid hit his face. Destroy. And since Destro was in control of all the commander's wealth, he will be the one to supply Cobra with all its needs. The commander then leads Destro to another part of the temple that overlooks a river. The commander points to a boat moored up on the river and tells Destro that those men getting in the boat are the surgical team that operated on him. And it cost the commander a small fortune to bring them out to this location, and now they are awaiting payment. The commander continues on, telling Destro that he now requires him to assist in the payment to the surgeons. Destro agrees, and they both go down to the river to meet with the surgeons. The lead surgeon comes forward and asks for their payment. The commander replies back coldly and tells the surgeon that the account will be settled in full and that he cannot allow them to live. And with that, he orders Destro to synchronise fire. The commander and Destro open up on the group of surgeons and the boat crew, killing them all. Once out of ammunition, the commander tells Destro that they can trust no one at the moment, and that it must slowly rouse the world, a world which holds many dangerous men, and that they must send out whispers to see if there are any suitable to join Cobra. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, in French Djibouti, on the Red Sea, a French Foreign Legion officer is leading a court-martial against a fellow legionnaire. That legionnaire was an Australian who had served in the Australian SES before joining the Legion, and he had been involved in several murders, including his own men. That legionnaire's name was Major Blood. While Blood has the charges read out to him, he thinks to himself, "You wait till I escape, and when I do, I'll find a better organisation suited to my needs." Also, elsewhere at a police station in Tokyo, police officers are discussing a series of professional hits that have hit Tokyo. It seems they're after one man, a ninja known as Storm Shadow, and that they are getting ready to launch one of the biggest manhunts in Japanese history. Unknown to the officers was a lone figure, and he's listening in on the conversation. Knowing that he can't stay in Japan now, as the situation has changed with every police officer searching for him, he thinks to himself, if he leaves, where will he go, and who would want his skills? Meanwhile, back in Asia, Cobra Commander and Destro stand over a globe covered in snakes. The commander proceeds to tell Destro that the word has gone out, and now they have to wait for those who think themselves cunning or deadly enough to join the cause. Seeing the commander is off guard, Destro sees a chance to strike at the commander. As he gets closer, suddenly one of the snakes on the globes rises up, a real cobra. This stops Destro in his tracks. The commander laughs, telling Destro that he has not forgotten to stay ever alert when he is around, and that he will stay one step ahead of you as Cobra Commander. And there you go, that's how the Red Jackal became Destro. He would continue to be Cobra Commander's right-hand man, but never forgetting what he did to the Red Shadows. Always waiting for that moment when the commander would lower his guard and exact his revenge. This would be the version of Destro that we would be familiar with for the next 2 years. Till yet again, Action Force and Destro's story was about to change, but I will cover that in another video. I personally think that this was another great origin story of how Cobra was introduced into Action Force. And full credit to the team at Battle Action Force on how they dealt with the change from Palitoy's Action Force to Hasbro's Action Force. For me, I always loved the toys, but it was the stories that really captured my imagination. I remember reading the comics over and over again, and I can still say today, even with the state of my mind that it is, I can remember the stories. Well, that's enough from me. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and please feel free to leave any comments below to let me know what you thought. I want to say a big thank you to bloodforthebaron.com for supplying me with the original images. They did an amazing job of recolouring these, and especially on most of the issues. The artists who contributed to this can be found in the description below. So please remember to like and subscribe to my channel, as it'll help it grow. Until next time, stay safe and blood for the Baron!